everybody, how's it going? And welcome to my review of Dr. Sleep, the sequel to The Shining, which of course came out back in 1980, and all these years later we are now getting a second chapter to that story. Now before I get stuck into this review, I just want to give a little bit of a backstory as to my history with The Shining in a way, because I think it's going to help people know where I'm coming from with this movie. Now, when The Shining came out, I was really young, so I didn't see it till years later, but even then, I was pretty young when I first saw it, and it didn't really grab me because, you know, it is a slow-burning film, and the horror aspect lies mainly in the breakdown and torment of this family, which I didn't get as a kid because, you know, of course, I wanted spooky things and people with chainsaws and hockey masks and whatever. It took a while before that movie really, I started appreciating it. And a while back, I got to see it on the big screen. I think it was mid-2000s or so. And yeah, I really dug it. And then I watched it again just a few nights ago in preparation for Dr. Sleep. And yeah, like the more I've seen it, the more I really understand it and really get it and really find it to be, one of the best horror movies of all time. I mean, these days, let's face it, Hollywood horror movies are absolute trash for the most part. It's a no-brainer. They're just relying on cheap jump scares, stories that are just very unimaginative, characters that we don't care about, which is really the biggest letdown for me with horror movies. So when the trailers for Dr. Sleep came out, I was kind of like, yeah, okay, like, I'm sort of interested. The whole internet was all like, oh my god, this movie's going to be so good, and I'm just like, yeah, I'll watch it. Because I'm not really a Stephen King fan either. Like, I appreciate the guy's work and everything, and, he's an icon, but, I'm not, like, I don't go out of my way to, watch his movies, well, based on his books. I mean, I've never read any of his books. Alright, so all that being said, I went and saw Dr. Sleep tonight, and holy shit, that is easily one of the best movies I've seen this year. Like, my god, I fucking loved it. I mean, yeah, this movie is 2.5 hours long, but I wasn't bored once. Like, seriously, the entire runtime of this film, I thought every single scene was so compelling and, really captivating. I was fascinated by what was going on. The dialogue, for the most part, was borderline poetic in places. I thought it really drove the story along well. The characters were great. They were really inventive and interesting, and just everything about this movie, mostly, I really dug. So at the start of the film, we get to see a little bit of a continuation from The Shining, so it's set in 1980, but with all the actors being replaced, of course, because we can't have younger versions of everyone, although, with all the de-aging stuff these days, would it have been too hard? But that being said, it was a little bit off-putting trying to get used to these new people being in the roles, but look, they did fine, and the story, it started off really, really well, and then it cuts to 2011, so we're 31 years later. Ewan McGregor is now playing Danny Torrance, the little kid, of course, from the first film, and this guy has gone through an absolute train wreck of a life. Let's face it, in the first film, that kid was traumatized in a really big way after all the things that he saw. His dad coming after him with an axe. That's enough to put any kid through the ringer. So he's been wrestling with all these demons, and he's kind of put his shining, his ability to see this spirit world and communicate with other people telepathically. He's kind of buried it until a group of vampires emerges. And when I say vampires, they're not your typical vampires that drink blood. These vampires, they feast on people's shines, like their life essence and stuff, which is really interesting. And this group is led by Rebecca Ferguson, who pretty much amazing in every movie that she's ever been in. And she was fantastic in this as a character named Rose the Hat, who, I just found deeply fascinating. Like, all the characters in this movie were just so multi-layered. And then we have young Kylie Curran as a character named Abra, who is like a super shiner. And so of course this group of vampires, they want her essence, so they're coming after her. She reaches out to Danny Torrance to help her, and that's all I'm going to say about the plot, which is more than I knew about it going in, to be honest. Like, I really didn't know what this movie was going to be about, but like I said, every scene I thought was amazing. It just had me riveted. There's plenty of nods to the original Shining to keep fans of that film entertained. Yeah, particularly like the entire third act pretty much. And yeah, even down to the fact that Danny Lloyd, who played little Danny in the first film, actually, well, he's in this movie somewhere, credited as Spectator. I didn't quite catch where he was in this film, but he's in there somewhere. And interestingly enough, like all the people that they recast the original characters, I never even recognized the guy who was playing Jack Torrance, as in Jack Nicholson's character, but it's Henry Thomas, as in, Henry Thomas from E.T. and Legends of the Fall and tons of other movies. Yeah, I didn't even recognize him, but yeah, again, it was a little off-putting trying to picture Jack Nicholson there again, like, yeah, but, what can you do? But the thing with this movie, you're either going to go into it looking at it, as a sequel to Stephen King's The Shining, which this one was once again, well, the novel was written by Stephen King, or you might go into it as looking at it as a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's original movie, The Shining. But I went into this looking at it as a new Mike Flanagan film. Now, this guy wrote, directed, and edited this movie, and he's just one of my favorite horror movie directors working today. Like, this guy has done, there was a movie called Oculus that not a lot of people know about, but is really, really good. He also did Hush and Ouija Origin of Evil, which was far better than it deserved to be, considering the first Ouija was absolute dog shit. Yeah, so I went into it looking at it as a Mike Flanagan film, and I was not disappointed. Like, this is by far his best work. And they nailed the horror element. I mean, there are a couple of jump scares in the film, but they're warranted jump scares. They're actually justified. They're not just there for, something happens, a big loud noise, and you're like, oh my God, why did that happen? All the jump scares were justified, but, they mainly did that thing, like, to me, good horror isn't a jump scare which you're over straight away. It's creepy imagery, and this movie had a lot of really intense creepy imagery. Things emerging from the dark slowly. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that gets under your skin and you remember. And yeah, there was also some really disturbing stuff in this film as well, including like a torturous murder of a small child, which, yeah, was, it was pretty full-on stuff. So yeah, don't take your kids to go see this movie. Well, they'll probably end up like me. Oh well. And another thing that I absolutely loved about this movie was that we got to really know the villains. We got to know who they are, and even though we didn't really sympathize with them, yeah, it was good that they weren't just some kind of faceless, nameless, evil thing that was just there to scare us. So the only things that let it down for me a little bit, there were some like scenes of exposition in the dialogue where it felt more like the characters were talking to the audience rather than to each other. But even then, it was still kind of interesting what they were saying, but you really did get a feeling that they weren't talking to each other. They may as well have just sort of turned to the camera and spoken to us in a way. And I guess the only other thing, like I said, I didn't mind the 2.5 hour runtime, but it is the sort of movie that you're probably not going to watch like over and over and over again straight away. It is the kind of movie that you do need to sort of step away from after you've seen it, process it, appreciate it, maybe watch it again, months later or whatever. Yeah, so the rewatchability factor wasn't too high on this one. But look, that being said, everything else about this movie I really loved. The pacing was tight, the story, the direction, makeup effects, everything about this movie was absolutely solid. I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected I would, and I'm going to give Dr. Sleep a 9 out of 10. Alrighty, so thank you very much for taking the time to watch my review of Dr. Sleep, and I would love to know what you guys thought of it, because, we live in a world these days where movies are so divisive, so there's probably going to be a whole bunch of people out there who hated this movie, and that's fine. But yeah, let me know what you thought of it, and which did you prefer, Dr. Sleep or The Shining? So let me know what you thought, drop me some comments, either here, Facebook, or Twitter. All the social media links are in the description below, because I like to talk about movies, and I would love to talk about movies with you. Catch you next time.
Click subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest movie reviews. Skynet will be taking over any day now, so what have you got to lose? Nyah.